The Senate will come to order. Senators will be in their seats. The clerk will call the roll.
Alley, Baumgardner, Berger, Billinger, Boyer, Bowers, Braun, Denning, Dahl, Estes, Fauskadeau, Francisco, Givens, Goddard, Haley, Hardy, Hawk, Hensley, Hildebrandt, Holland, Kirshen, Longbine, Lynn, Masterson, McGinn, Miller, Olson, Peterson, Petty, Pilcher-Cook, Pyle, Rucker, Skubal, Sulentrop, Sykes, Taylor, Tyson, Wagle, Ware, Wilborn.
Senators and their guests, please rise and give prayerful attention to the chaplain.
Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, the Negro National Baseball League began on February the 13th, 1920, in Kansas City, Missouri. And Lord, I come today reminded of that great Hall of Fame baseball pitcher, Satchel Paige, who played for the Kansas City Monarchs. I'm reminded not only of his wisdom in the game of baseball, but also of his wisdom in the game of life. He said to those who would listen, "Don't pray when it rains if you don't pray when the sun shines." Lord, we know that things will not always go as we'd like. We'll want the rain when the sun is shining, and we'll want the sun when it's raining. We'll want constructive criticism from folks while also wanting their kudos. Help us to echo the Apostle Paul's words to the Philippians, where he said in chapter 4, verses 11 through 13, "I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. I can do all of this through him who gives me the strength." So, Master, teach us to pray with thanksgiving, whether rain or shine, up or down, want or plenty, whether feeling good or feeling not so good. For you always know just what we need and when we need it. I come to you in the precious name of Jesus. Amen. Amen.
Please continue standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
Senate Bill 157 by Senators Hildebrand and others, an act concerning family law. Senate Bill 158 by Senator Miller, an act designating the polka as a state dance. Senate Bill 159 by Senator Fauskadeau, an act concerning voter registration. Senate Bill 160 by Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure. Senate Bill 161 by Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning domestic violence. Senate Bill 162 by Committee on Public Health and Welfare, an act concerning children and minors. Senate Bill 163 by Committee on Public Health and Welfare, an act concerning insurance. Senate Bill 164 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning alcoholic beverages.
This constitutes introduction of Senate Bill 157 through Senate Bill 164. Please note reference of bills on pages 1 and 2 of the calendar. Correction and approval of the journal. On a point of personal privilege, the chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Faust-Cadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I am reminding the body to join me and other fellow legislators tomorrow afternoon in the Visitors Auditorium to see the film Resilience. You will learn more about the connection between childhood adversity and our Kansas economy. There will be 2 showings, one at noon and one at 2 p.m. The presentations last just 30 minutes. Staff and board members from the Kansas Children's Service League will be there to present and answer questions and share research about adverse childhood experiences which dramatically affect school readiness and the productivity of our state's workforce. Again, they will be in the Visitor Center, Kansas Children's League Day at the Capitol tomorrow. Mr. Vice President, thank you.
Before reassessing, are there announcements? Seeing none, the chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Johnson County, Senator Denning.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. What the plan is today is I'll be making a motion to recess, and at that motion, Senate Republicans will go to our normal room 548 South to caucus. And I also should note we have some senators that are running a bit late, so we're going to go caucus, and then we'll come back and we'll vote on those bills that we debated yesterday.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Senate Democrats will be caucusing upon adjournment in our normal room, 287 North.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Denning.
Mr. Vice President, I move the Senate recess to the sound of the gavel.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. The Senate is recessed. The Senate will come to order. On appointed personal privilege, the chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the pleasure of having 6 pages from the brand new Olathe West High School, which is a flagship hospital just west of Olathe in a very growing area. And I want to introduce them to you really quickly. We have Hannah Lewis, and just kind of raise your hand when Hannah Lewis, and she's a sophomore. Jack Flannery is a freshman. Sarah Ellis is a junior. And Madeline Sears is a junior. Evan Cladney, he is a junior as well. And Abby Marshall. And I just had the pleasure of spending some time with them, and they are so bright. They're all gifted students, and they're very bright, and they're, is Nicole here? Where? Oh, there's Nicole. She is their, basically their instructor, teacher, gives them so much wisdom and guidance to help them be the best that they can possibly be. And thank you for being here. We appreciate you.
On appointed personal privilege, the chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Falscadeau.
Thank you again, Mr. Vice President. It is my honor to acknowledge a guest who in the VIP section, Amanda Meyer. She is with the Wichita Family Crisis Center and help organize what's going on in the Rotunda today here on against domestic violence. And we just want to thank you and applaud you for the work you're doing for those who were victims of domestic violence. And if the body would just give her a round of applause, appreciate it.
We are now ready for final action. On this roll call, we will take the following: the bills on page 3, Senate Bill 19 and Senate Bill 20. The clerk will read the titles.
Senate Bill 19, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure. Senate Bill 20, an act concerning courts.
The clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Baumgardner. Berger. Billinger. Boyer. Bowers. Braun. Denning. Dahl. Estes. Falscadeau. Francisco. Givens. Goddard. Haley. Hardy. Hawk. Hensley. Hildebrand. Holland. Kirshen. Longbine. Lynn. Masterson. McGinn. Miller. Olson.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Senate Bill 20 is one that I've been struggling with for a couple days since we've heard it. I wish they would have debated a little more on it. I appreciate the work from the senator from McPherson, the chairman, on the bill. Definitely understand what it's doing. I don't have no problem with funding the employees of the court. The thing I struggle with Senate Bill 20, with the fines that go on traffic violations, some of these are very steep, and it puts some of our citizens in a tough position to pay a fine or miss a court date. And I really hope the committee in the future, I'm going to vote no on this, but I hope the committee in the future will really look at not having these fines so high and make them more reasonable, because I think right now we've got our fines so high that we've got people that miss court dates, get in trouble with the law that shouldn't. So I'm going to vote no, Mr. Chairman, on Senate Bill 20 and aye on the remainder.
Senator from Johnson, would you like a remark spread on the journal?
Peterson. Petty. Pilcher Cook. Pyle. Rucker. Skubal. Solentrop. Sykes. Taylor. Tyson. Wagle. Ware. Wilborn.
Has every senator had an opportunity to vote? Senator from Sedgwick? Does any senator wish to change their vote? Does any senator wish to explain their vote? Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Forty voting in favor and 0 opposed to Senate Bill 19, 35 voting in favor, 5 opposed to Senate Bill 20. These measures, having received the required constitutional majority, are hereby declared passed. The chair recognizes the majority leader from Johnson County, Senator Denning.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. The chair appoints a senator from Sedgwick, Senator McGinn, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The Senate, having resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole, will now consider those items listed on the calendar under the heading of General Orders. We now turn our attention to Senate Bill 39. Chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Peterson, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 39 is a follow-up bill to the Franchise Act we passed last year. It is agreed upon language between the Automobile Dealers Association and the manufacturers. It's very similar to the one in Iowa. We had no opposition testimony to it. Some of the issues last year that they had to resolve was how does it fairly treat the small dealers as well as the large ones. They came up with a solution in Iowa, which we have replicated, that a small dealership can present 90 days worth of retail orders to establish their retail reimbursement price, and a large dealership can give 100 consecutive orders. We are one of only 7 states that do not have this in their statute. With that, I'd stand for questions.
Are there questions for the senator? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
I move with the committee rise and report. It reports Senate Bill 39 favorable for passage.
You've all heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. At this time, Chair recognizes the senator from Johnson to explain SCR 1606, Senator Pelcher Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. SCR 1606 is a concurrent resolution condemning the enactment of the Reproductive Health Act by the state of New York because it violates the life and well-being of a woman and her unborn child. And the people of Kansas value, as a matter of public policy in our laws, we have worked to value and seek to protect all human life from fertilization, and which is even in our statute. The people in Kansas value the lives of the mother and the unborn child in the womb and seek to protect both from abuse and violence. The New York law expands abortion past 24 weeks of pregnancy and allows abortions up to the moment of birth if, quote, the abortion is necessary to protect the patient's life or health, close quote. This terminology allows a woman to claim minimal mental or societal effects as a reason for an abortion up to the very moment of birth. So this New York law allows not just physicians, but also nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, and licensed midwives to do the abortions, which removes important safety precautions from women. So this law repealed vital protections for an unborn child who's born alive and who survives an abortion attempt. It repealed all the protections from criminal acts of violence against a woman's unborn child and leaves citizens no recourse for the killing of any child in the womb. And this New York law also lessens the consequences for perpetrators of domestic violence when their actions cause the death of a woman's unborn child, which can incite abusive behavior towards a pregnant woman. This New York law, this resolution will be sending a message to the state of New York, basically to the governor. It sends a copy of this resolution to the governor of New York and to each member of the New York State Senate and the New York State Assembly. Now, I want to start by saying we should all have compassion for any woman who's undergone an abortion. We don't know what manner of coercion she was under, what kind of pressure, or what kind of information she was given. But we do need to take the blinders off, because the New York abortion law is clearly harmful towards women and their children in a way that also affects us as human beings, how we view ourselves, and what that means to humanity. A woman has a right to be protected from those who would use and abuse her, especially when she is carrying her unborn child. We know from historical events that a woman is extremely vulnerable when she is pregnant. And to protect her human dignity, all states should recognize that and ensure protection for her and her child in their laws. Tragically, the New York law eliminated criminal penalties for violence that ended a child's life in the mother's womb. It's time to take the blinders off, because this is infanticide, is where the abortion mentality takes us. Pro-life advocates have said for years that any argument for legal abortion can be used as an argument for legal infanticide. And now the abortion advocates in New York have made that point publicly. This is not just an individual choice. It affects society and how we view each other. When we permit individuals to say that some lives are not worthy of living, what does that say about us and about our own lives? Abortion advocates make the statement that, quote, a woman may abort a viable fetus after 24 weeks of pregnancy only if her life or health is at risk. Only if her life or health is at risk. But what they don't tell you is that health exception is a facade. It's a cover-up because the health term can be used for any reason, including emotional or financial health. And I want to challenge the news media to get this important fact straight and give the public correct information about the health exception that is unknown to many. This resolution is about protecting human life, reinstituting protections for women and their unborn children, ascribing inherent value to all human life, and rejecting any legislation that would incite abuse and violence towards women and their unborn children. Madam Chairman, I will stand for questions.
Are there any questions for the senator from Johnson? Chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you. I don't have any questions, just a couple of comments. Today's episode of political theater is as cynical as any that I've witnessed in the last 3 years. Today, we are wasting our time and the money of Kansas taxpayers. Today, we are pointing out the speck in a neighbor's eye while we completely disregard the plank in our own. The cynic in me believes that the primary reason we're voting on this is for postcards for 2020 elections. Does the resolution do anything for Kansans? No. Instead of throwing stones at New York, why don't we get our own house in order? The issues facing our constituents are many. Instead of focusing on New York, why are we not discussing Medicaid expansion, transportation funding, stabilizing our payments to CAPERS, ending the litigation on school funding, the 70 children that went missing from DCF on our watch, or the ever-growing waiting list of PRTF beds? How about mental health? I have a constituent who has been working for years to get services for their child who has needs. According to their MCO, their child hasn't tried hard enough to harm or kill himself, so the MCO continues denying services. What about the fact that 20 to 40% of those PRTF beds in Kansas go to out-of-state kids because they get fully reimbursed for those kids, unlike Kansas kids? These are the issues we should be discussing. These are the issues that affect Kansans. However, if you really want to talk about New York, let's discuss New York City. Did you know that they reduced their children in foster care from 55,000 to 7,000? Keep in mind, New York City has a population 4 times that of Kansas, and we have the same number of kids in foster care. How did they do it? They have a First 1,000 Days initiative. They invest in early childhood. They use evidence-based programs. They provide wraparound services. Their case managers, their caseloads are no larger than 15 kids. How about we have these discussions? If we want to demonstrate our commitment to protecting life, we should work on policy to protect and invest the children in Kansas that we represent. Thank you.
Other questions for Senator from Johnson and/or comments? Chair recognizes the Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question for the Senator from Johnson. Is there anything in the bill that was passed in New York that is different from law that is currently available in Roe versus Wade?
Senator from Johnson.
By repealing all the laws in New York, they did sync up their laws with Roe versus Wade. And, well, no, I'll take that back. What they were doing when they passed this law is try to reinstitute everything Roe versus Wade, Doe versus Bolton, plus into their state law.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Right now, that is the law in the nation, and I don't see how it's inappropriate for a state legislature to try to codify that law and add a separate but equal layer of protection for women making health decisions. I think this is appropriate for New York to have done what they did and stand in objection to this resolution.
Any other questions or comments for the senator from Johnson? Chair recognizes the senator from Wyandotte, Senator Haley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I really don't have so many questions as much as comments, and I'll be brief. I know that we want to get on with this discussion. I do want to say first, by way of disclosure, at one point in time, I lived in New York. Lived there for a while, and New York is a place, for those of you who haven't been, it's a place of great diversity. There are many different schools of thought that come out of the state of New York, many different peoples, and the way they think and they emerge is really quite interesting, Madam Chair. I mean, look at the last election where two known New Yorkers advanced for president, one who won the nation by popular vote, Senator Clinton, and one who won it by electoral college vote, another New Yorker, Trump. The same state can have various views on how we approach sensitive issues, very sensitive issues that often divide us, and certainly the topic of choice, reproductive choice, is one of those that not only has obviously caught the attention of the country with the Reproductive Health Act of New York this year, but now captivate our attention during our session today. But as one who has lived there and one who loves New York, and I still love New York, Madam Chair, I won't go into any great detail there, but to say that the policies of diverse peoples are often at conflict. And their legislature did go through quite a debate. I appreciate our own research department and that in Albany, their state capital, helping me to better understand how they reached having what at first blush appears to be so onerous a policy put into place. The allegations that came and that still come today as represented is that this is abortion on demand up until birth. And as has been stated, it only takes clearer research to understand what the exceptions are to something that I would hope all of us agree is not a policy that any of us would endorse. That is not what the Reproductive Health Act does. And I commend to each of us, those of you who have sponsored this resolution and those of us who do not support it, to take a look at what their law says. And then if you have a moment, before we as the senator from Johnson says, look a speck in the eye of New York, the senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes. Let's look at the log in ours, and if you'll review still, despite our very best efforts to rein in third trimester abortions, to look at what's happening here in Kansas and what the exceptions are for abortion or procedures being eligible into the third trimester. And you would find, I think, Madam Chair, upon close review, that as diverse as New York is and Kansas may not be, we're really not too very far apart in the policy that they have instituted in their legislature this year and the policies that you have labored, certainly since I've been here, these 25 years, to rein in and to make illegal. And so in asking for that comparison, and let me underscore too that I, David Haley, the senator from Wyandotte, as pro-choice as I am, recall being concerned about the taking of a viable life where there is no foundation. I'm about as pro-choice as you come, having served proudly on the board of Planned Parenthood when I was a Republican, and certainly continuing to respect women's right to choose. But when my governor then, Kathleen Sebelius, vetoed what was passed from this chamber, what I felt was collusion as an exception. Some of you might recall it was in this chamber. In fact, confer with your anti-choice lobbyist, she'll remind you that I did say that it should be two independent physicians, not two working in concert, that allow for the exception of a viable infant. It must be clear that it is for the health and safety and life of the woman carrying it prior to that procedure being implemented. And I supported, over Governor Sebelius, I supported the veto override, which was not successful. And I say that because I felt then and I felt now that we have to look at the policies we put in place. And I am comfortable in saying that the New York law provides for two, I think, very fundamental areas which, whether you define yourself as anti-choice or pro-life or pro-choice or pro-abortion, however you want to characterize it, that we can all agree on, no matter where we find ourselves. I certainly can. And I'm comfortable in saying that New York, in its ability to promulgate its own laws, Madam Chair, has an area where their reports are going to show not an increase, I believe, in the numbers that they have proportionately to their population in third trimester abortions, because they are indeed where it has been found that the fetus is deceased, and again, where it is to preserve the life of the mother. Finally, New York really doesn't care what we think. When you send this to Albany, when you send this paper off, they pick it up and say, oh, that's them out there in Kansas. It underscores that we're a little bit, backwards in sending to them edicts of our displeasure with them. We, who our entire population is not the size of one of their boroughs of the city, our 3 million, I think you could find them all in Manhattan, New York, not Manhattan, Kansas, of course. And so I, for one, want to recede from that, the taking of the time and the energy to send to an entity in our federalist system that has all rights to review and to pass legislation, as indeed we do, that we refrain from this action. And I, for one, drastically recede from that and vote no.
Any other questions or comments for the senator from Johnson? Chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't usually stand for issues that are as sensitive and divisive as this one. But in this case, first of all, I want to thank the senator from Johnson, Senator Pilcher Cook, for bringing this resolution to our floor, because it's caused me to think about life. And many of you might know that I've had a lot of experience with the disease of Alzheimer's in my family. And one of the things that this bill has caused me to think about was the end of life of both my father and my mother, 3 weeks apart, from Alzheimer's. As they were passing from this life, I crawled into bed with both of them. And at that time, I had one of those little iPods, and I'd put the little iPod things in my ears, and I would sing them songs from when they were young. Okay, there were songs from the 40s and 50s, and some from the 60s. And I think they knew I was there because the hospice nurses said, even though you think they're not there, they can really hear you. So talk to them, sing to them, let them know. And so when I look at what happened in New York, it caused me to think that we're really offering a choice for infanticide. And that could this evolve into a choice for me to end my mom and dad's life, because I thought maybe they weren't comfortable or they weren't really needed anymore. So I just caution the body to think about that this is not just about progress for women by giving them a choice to kill their child who has just exited the womb. But this really provides a horrific precedent for our culture and how we think about life. So, and this weekend I'll be spending the weekend with my sister, who also has Alzheimer's. So, obviously runs in the family. And that's a terrible way to end your life. But I can tell you, as I stand here today, that the biggest joy I had at the end of my mom and dad's life was cuddling up to them in bed like I was a child and telling them how much I loved them and that I would see them on the other side. So, Madam Chair, thank you for your indulgence. Thank you for the indulgence of the body. And thank you for Senator Pilcher Cook, and for those of you on the floor who will be supporting this resolution.
Other questions or comments? Chair recognizes Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Wago.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to say that I think this is a very appropriate statement for Kansans to make to the state of New York that is now allowing infanticide, now allowing abortions on third trimester babies. We have a horrific history in Kansas. We have titles now for different generations. We have millennials, we have Generation X. And when I was in high school, I was called a flower child, and I graduated in 1971. Roe v. Wade was passed in 1973, and we had no abortion restrictions on our books. And in fact, we had a clinic that opened in the city of Wichita that performed abortions. I was married at age 19, divorced at 21, but during that time, because there was a big sign that said free pregnancy tests, I did go into that facility to have a pregnancy test done. And while I was waiting for the return of the test, I remember being asked to go into a room for counseling, where I was told that, I was asked, are you married? Yes, I'm married. Well, why are you here? Well, I think I might be pregnant. Well, you're too young. Tell me, you have too much in front of you. Your life, you're in college. Your life would be so much better if you didn't have this burden. And, oh, by the way, we can take care of this real easily if you're pregnant. The whole thing seemed awkward to me, because when I did walk in to register at the front desk, I didn't tell you the story of I looked up on the wall, and up on the wall was a huge map of the world with colored pins over places all over the world. And I asked the receptionist, what are these pins on this map for? And they said, that is to indicate the places we serve for women around the world. And there were pins on that map from all around the world. Later on, when I became very politically active in the late 80s, I realized that this doctor was one of 3 doctors in the United States that would perform an abortion on a third trimester baby, and we continued to have no restrictions on that. I ran for office in 91. I was elected to the House, and by then I was pregnant. I had children, and I had become what's called pro-life. I realized that babies in the womb were life, a separate life from my own, and I was embarrassed about what was going on down the street. And lo and behold, when I came up here into the House, I found out that the doctor of the day used to be that physician from Wichita, and I found out that there was a lot of money from him to legislators in the State House to make sure that we passed no restrictions on abortions. And yet in the 90s, we still had no restrictions on abortions. And I can't imagine how many pins were in that map by then. And over the years, Kansans decided that they want restrictions on viable infants. In fact, in 1991, we had what's called the Summer of Mercy. And thousands of people came to Wichita to protest that practice that was in Wichita. And Roe v. Wade actually said in that ruling that a state has an interest in monitoring abortions on viable interests. And yet again, there was another decision after that, Planned Parenthood versus ks, and they defined viability around weeks 23, 24, and yet a woman is pregnant in a normal pregnancy for 40 weeks. And as science evolved, as sonograms evolved, as we learned more about fetal development, the country became pro-life. And we have passed many laws, including a ban on dismemberment abortion here in 2013 in the state of Kansas. Our first restriction on abortion was one I was very involved in. We had a pro-choice House, a pro-choice Senate, And we passed the women's right to know. It wasn't any restriction on abortion, but what it did was that if you were thinking about an abortion, it gave you a little booklet that described, that had pictures of infants in the womb. And Sandy Prager, who negotiated that bill with me, she was pro-choice. She was a senator on the health committee. I was the House member on the health committee. She was criticized by the pro-choice groups for being too conservative. I was criticized by the pro-life groups for not being conservative enough. But we came up with a bill, and for many years after that, the sidewalk counselors would come to me and said, Susan, you know what? When women see pictures, when they have a sonogram done where they see pictures of fetal development, they choose not to have an abortion because it educates women about exactly what is inside of them. So I would say that Kansas has come a long way in respecting life in the womb, and it's been a tremendous struggle to get there. But it's totally appropriate for the Kansas legislature to say, in a day and age when we have sonograms that are very advanced now, and when we understand fetal development, that New York is going backwards. When they approve infanticide, and so what comes next? Is it people with disabilities? Is it the elderly? What makes life have value? And does a life have value if it can't care for itself? This is a very dangerous precedent, and New York celebrated this legislation passing. It's embarrassing to those of us in Kansas to have a state go backward in an age when our science is so advanced, and we know that an abortion in a third trimester is taking the life of a viable human being. So I think it's an appropriate thing that we take this action today, and I hope the House takes it up if it passes here, which I'm sure it will. And it's a message that I hope other states send to the state of New York. I don't plan on visiting there. I'm embarrassed. We believe in Kansas in a culture of life. And most people in America believe in protecting life. And we're stating that publicly today with this resolution.
Are there other questions for the senator from Johnson? Or comments? Chair recognizes the senator from, Lynn? Senator Tyson, thank you. That's why you guys sit together like that. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our founding fathers wrote that everyone has the right to life and liberty. We are a nation based on principle and decency. If we do not respect and protect the born and the unborn, all other professed morals and values are meaningless. The dignity of human life is not just the principle in the Bible, it is one of our main principles of our civilized society. We have a responsibility to defend life. A similar debate is going on in the Virginia legislature. They are considering legislation similar to what New York has passed. Let me read to you some of that debate. Where it's obvious that a woman is about to give birth, she has physical signs that she is about to give birth, would that still be a point at which she could request an abortion if she was so certified? If she is dilating, asked the majority leader of the House. The response was, Mr. Chairman, that would be a decision between the doctor, the physician, and the woman. They would make at that point. I understand, said the majority leader. I'm asking if your bill would allow that. My bill would allow that. Yes. We have a responsibility to defend life. We should not sit back and do nothing as other states in these United States make decisions that go directly against the principles in which our nation was founded. I take seriously my responsibility to protect the born and the unborn in our state and our nation. I stand with the good senator in support of SCR 1606, and I ask that you stand with us.
Other questions or comments? The Senator from Johnson. Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. To address some of the issues that were brought up, there was a study done by the Guttmacher Institute, which is a supporter of Planned Parenthood. And they said that the data suggests that most women seeking later terminations are not doing so for reasons of fetal anomaly or life endangerment. There is never a reason for an abortion provider to kill a child in a late-term pregnancy. I've had several OBGYNs contact me to insist that this is the case and that they are horrified by this New York law. Killing a full-term child inside or outside the womb is never necessary. Humane alternatives are readily available, as numerous physicians will confirm. And as far as how often it occurs, according to the latest data, there's about 1,671 abortion providers in the United States. And of those, 20% do abortions after the child is 20 weeks. That equates to about 330 abortion providers across the nation willing to kill viable unborn children. According to the CDC, in 2015, approximately 8,296 abortions were done after 21 weeks gestation. Women do not need late-term abortion. They need support and encouragement to allow them to parent their child in the best way possible. So some have asked why. Why this resolution, sending a message to New York about legislation in their state? Because this is a civil rights issue. When extreme injustice is inflicted on innocent living human beings, even killing those human beings by leaving them to die, it is incumbent upon Kansas leaders to speak out for those who cannot speak for themselves. It is a civil rights issue. Why are we sending this message to New York? Because we want to let our Kansas Supreme Court know that we would find this abortion mentality in our state as totally unacceptable. A new poll by the nonpartisan firm called ks.gov found that an overwhelming majority of Americans reject abortion late in pregnancy. 79% reject all abortion in the last 3 months of pregnancy. 80% oppose abortion the day before a child would have been born. And 82% reject, deny medical care to viable infants. This is a child we can see, a child we can hear, a child that someone can feel, that someone can hold, and someone can love. This is a child who can feel pain. This is a child who can feel love. As scientific evidence reveals that a child will suffer severe attachment disorders when not given love at the beginning of their lives. Killing that living child by leaving them to die is depravity. It used to be that abortion advocates said they wanted abortion to be safe and rare. Aside from the fact that abortion kills a child and is never safe for that human being, abortion advocates fight against any legislation that would provide more safety for the woman who's in a vulnerable position. Instead, they defend abortion at any cost. And look where this cost has brought us. We are now facing infanticide. If our society does not recognize human life as having intrinsic value in our laws, human life is then treated like property. Property to be killed, bought, or sold, giving a, quote, right to a dead child. This is a civil rights issue. This is a civil rights issue for the child who cannot speak. Giving some the ability to decide who is worthy of living hurts us all. It certainly hurts anyone with a disability. And if you are personally opposed but do not vote against abortion, you're taking the position that human life can be treated as property, that it's an individual choice of how one wants to treat that property. This is the mindset that gave us infanticide. Human beings to be destroyed at will. Martin Luther King said, quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Close quote. Infanticide used to be unthinkable, but abortion advocates have made it debatable and are now saying it is justifiable. If our society refuses to recognize that human life is sacred, our moral worth is dependent on those in power, and each human life is at risk. We urge New York to reconsider their recent actions and repeal this legislation for the good of humanity. Madam Chairman, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports SCR 1606 favorably for passage.
You've all heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. This time, the chair recognizes the majority leader from Johnson County, Senator Denning.
Thank you, I move the committee rise and report.
You've all heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries.
The clerk will read the committee report.
On motion of Senator Denning, the Senate resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders with Senator McGinn in the chair. recommended Senate Bill 39 be passed, and Senate Concurrent Resolution 1606 be adopted.
The chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator McGinn, to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Reports of standing committees. The clerk will read.
Madam President, the Committee on Transportation recommends Senate Bill 17 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Senator Peterson, chairperson. Madam President, the Committee on Commerce recommends Senate Bill 27 be passed and be placed on the consent calendar. Senator Lynn, chairperson. Madam President, the Committee on Transportation recommends Senate Bill 40 be passed and be placed on the consent calendar. Senator Peterson, chairperson. Madam President, the Committee on Transportation recommends Senate Bill 41 be passed and be placed on the consent calendar. Senator Peterson, chairperson. Madam President, the Committee on Ways and Means recommends Senate Bill 25 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Senator McGinn, chairperson.
We will refer back to that order of business, introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
Senate Bill 165 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning health and health care. Senate Bill 166 by Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning children and minors. Senate Bill 167 by Senators Baumgardner and others, an act concerning abortion. Senate Bill 168 by Committee on Commerce, an act enacting the Kansas Home Inspectors Professional Competency and Financial Responsibility Act. Senate Bill 169 by Committee on Utilities, an act concerning the Department of Health and Environment. Senate Bill 170 by Committee on Utilities, an act concerning the Department of Health and Environment. Senate Bill 171 by Committee on Utilities, an act concerning the Department of Health and Environment. Senate Bill 172 by Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning workers' compensation. Senate Bill 173 by Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning the disposition of state real property. Senate Bill 174 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning income taxation. Senate Bill 175 by Committee on Assessment and Taxation, an act concerning public employee organizations. Senate Bill 176 by Committee on Assessment and Taxation, an act concerning the Department of Commerce. Senate Bill 177 by Committee on Assessment and Taxation, an act concerning taxation. Senate Bill 178 by Committee on Assessment and Taxation, an act concerning sales taxation. Senate Bill 179 by Committee on Assessment and Taxation, an act concerning income taxation. Senate Bill 180 by Senators Hensley and others, an act enacting the Kansas Buy American Act.
This constitutes introduction of Senate Bill 165 through Senate Bill 180. Are there announcements? Chair recognizes Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
Thank you. You found on your desk today information about Early Learning Caucus. This will be the second one that we're having in this session. It's tomorrow morning at 7:30. It's in the classroom, in the visitor center classroom. This one is about is being presented by the YMCA's about their child care task force, and it's a good follow-up to what our first one when we had from the Greater Kansas City Chamber, and just the importance of investment in early childhood and how it leads to job creation as well as economic development. I hope you can join us at 7:30 tomorrow.
Senator from Ford, Senator Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock will be the prayer breakfast, Thursday morning prayer breakfast, room 142 South. The guest speaker is Barry Feekman of the Topeka Rescue Mission.
Senator from McPherson, Senator Wilburn.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Just want to remind the Senate Judiciary Committee that we have canceled the meeting tomorrow, so we will not be meeting Thursday or Friday. Thank you.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Tomorrow, the Ways and Means Committee budget on Larned, Osawatomie, and Guardians will finish the hearings at 8:30 in room 159 South. That's the Ag room. We appreciate the Ag Chair giving us their room. I know a couple of you may have a conflict with transportation. Please know we are just finishing the conferees hearing at that time. So if you can make it, that'd be great. But if you're not there, we understand, and we'll make sure you have all that information. At 11:30, we will try to do the begin the deliberations, and we'll do the guardianship first. And that will be in our Ways and Means room. Then at noon in the Ways and Means room, we will begin the consideration of the agency budget on Department of Children and Families. So if you have any questions, get a hold of me or my office, but that's our schedule for tomorrow.
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Senate Utilities is meeting tomorrow for a presentation from the Southwest Power Pool.
Senator from Cloud, Senator Bowers.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Ethics, Elections, and Local Government would have their meeting tomorrow, 142 South, 9:30, and it's a hearing on Senate Bill 105. Thank you.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Tomorrow in Senate Commerce, we will be working Senate Bill 26, and we do have that in my committee, and we have worked that bill. However, wanted the committee to know that we will actually be working the exact equivalent of that bill that was passed by the House, and that is House Bill 2044, and that's the bill that's regarding the tax credit for those that employ individuals that are disabled. So I just wanted to make that clarification that we'll be working House Bill 2044.
Are there additional announcements? Seeing none, the chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Johnson County, Senator Denning.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Before we gavel out, I wanted to let everybody know that the Senate will not be on general orders tomorrow, but we will be doing our final action on the two bills that we heard today, and then that Senate Bill number 18 that's on the consent calendar. So we'll be doing our final action tomorrow, but we will not be on general orders. Mr. Vice President, I move the Senate adjourn until 2:30 p.m. on Thursday, February 14th, 2019.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. The Senate is adjourned.